Someone you love is gone, not far away, not unreachable. Gone, the specific weight of that word, gone, lands differently than any other word in the language, because it means something that was here is now not here, and it is never coming back. You know that feeling. Maybe you've felt it already. Maybe you're afraid of feeling it. Either way, your brain knows exactly what I mean the moment I say it. Now imagine feeling that for the first time. Not just you personally. Humanity, the first time a human being stood over someone they loved and understood, really understood that this person was not coming back, ever. What did they do with that? They had no religion yet, no funeral home, no grief counselor, no language for what death even meant beyond the physical fact of it, no concept of heaven or afterlife or what happens next, just a body, and the unbearable weight of absence. What happened in that moment, and everything that happened after, is one of the most profound stories in human history, and almost nobody knows it. Here is the assumption most people carry about ancient humans and death. They were used to it. Death was everywhere: predators, disease, starvation, injury. So ancient humans probably didn't feel it the way we do. They were tougher, more practical. You died, you got left behind, the group moved on. Death was just part of life, and they accepted it without the emotional weight we attach to it today. That assumption is wrong, deeply wrong. And the evidence that dismantles it is some of the most moving material in all of archaeology. Ancient humans didn't just accept death. They were the first creatures on Earth to refuse to accept it. They buried their dead. They decorated the bodies. They placed objects in graves. They returned to grave sites. They grieved in ways that lasted weeks, months, possibly years. They were, as far as we know, the only species in the history of this planet that looked at death and said, "This person mattered. This person deserves more than disappearing." That impulse, that refusal, is one of the things that made us human. Let's start at the beginning. Because when humans first began burying their dead, the moment we can pinpoint the story becomes extraordinary. In 2017, archaeologists excavating the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa made a discovery that rewrote the timeline of human burial. Deep inside the cave, in a chamber so difficult to access that researchers had to crawl through passages barely wide enough for a human body, they found something impossible. The bones of Homo naledi, an ancient human relative, deliberately placed, repeatedly, over a long period of time. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't random bones falling through cracks. The bodies had been intentionally carried deep into this cave through passages that required effort, planning, and purpose, and placed there. The age of these remains, approximately 300,000 years old. This pushed the evidence for intentional burial back further than anyone expected. Before Homo sapiens, before modern human cognition as we understand it, an ancient cousin of ours with a brain smaller than ours was already doing something with its dead that went beyond practicality. But the most famous ancient burial evidence comes from a site we've mentioned before, Shanidar Cave in Iraq. In the 1950s and 60s, Ralph Selecki excavated Shanidar and found something that stopped the scientific world: Neanderthal burials dating back 60,000 to 80,000 years. Bodies carefully positioned, evidence of deliberate placement. And, in one case, the concentration of medicinal flower pollen we discussed in the medicine video. Someone carried a Neanderthal body to a specific place, positioned it carefully, and based on the pollen evidence, someone placed flowers. Think about what that means. A Neanderthal, 60,000 years ago, placing flowers on a grave, not because flowers helped anything, not because it was practical, because something in that brain said this person deserves beauty. This moment deserves more than just leaving. Now here is where it gets even more profound, because it wasn't just burial, it was what they put in the graves. Sungir, Russia, 34,000 years ago. 2 children buried together, a boy and a girl, head to head. Around them, more than 10,000 hand-carved mammoth ivory beads. Each bead took approximately 45 minutes to make. Someone spent over 7,000 hours, nearly a year, of working every single day creating objects specifically to bury with these children. Read that again. A year of daily work to bury with children who were gone. Also in the graves, carved ivory spears, fox teeth pendants, red ochre covering the bodies. The ochre, a red mineral pigment, shows up in burials across Africa, Europe, and Asia, spanning hundreds of thousands of years, across continents that had no contact with each other. Every culture independently choosing to cover their dead in red. Nobody knows exactly why. Some researchers think ochre represented blood life. Some think it was about preservation. Some think it was purely ceremonial. But here is what we know for certain. Whoever buried these children chose the color of life to cover the color of death. They chose warmth for something that had gone cold. In Kafse Cave in Israel, archaeologists found burials dating back 100,000 years. A young woman buried with a child across her arms, not her child biologically, but placed there deliberately. Someone decided these two belonged together in death, a mother holding a child she had perhaps helped care for. The gesture of tenderness so clear across 100,000 years that the archaeologists who found it described feeling unable to speak. In Dolnvastanis in the Czech Republic 27,000 years ago, 3 individuals buried together, facing each other, their hands touching. The grave covered with mammoth shoulder blades, massive bones, placed like a roof over them, protected even in death. But here is the question nobody asks, the question that reaches further than archaeology into something much deeper. Why? Not why did they bury the dead? Why did it matter to them? What were they feeling? What were they trying to do? Because the answer to that question tells you something about what ancient humans understood about themselves and about us that we haven't changed in 300,000 years. Anthropologist Barbara King spent decades studying grief across species. Her book Evolving God traces the emotional roots of what we might call religion, and what she found about ancient grief is remarkable. The closest thing to human grief in the animal world appears in great apes. Chimpanzee mothers have been documented carrying the bodies of their dead infants for days, sometimes weeks, unable to leave them, unable to accept the absence. This behavior is heartbreaking to observe, and it tells us something important. The emotional precursor to grief, the inability to process absence, is ancient. It predates humans, but what humans added to this was something no other species has done. We made absence mean something. When an ancient human buried a body, especially when they put objects in the grave, when they placed flowers, when they covered the dead in ochre, they were doing something cognitively extraordinary. They were saying, death is not the end of meaning. This person existed. This person mattered. And the fact that their body is gone does not erase what they were. This is what grief actually is at its deepest level. Not just pain, not just the neurochemical distress of losing someone your brain has built pathways around. Grief is the refusal to let meaning disappear with the body. Your ancient ancestor standing over a grave 50,000 years ago, placing a carved object into the earth beside someone they loved, was doing the same thing you do when you keep a photograph, or return to a grave, or refuse to clear out someone's belongings. They were saying, you were here, and I will not let the world forget it. So how did ancient humans actually cope with death day to day? Because in a group of 30 to 50 people, death was not a distant abstract thing. It was intimate, personal, constant. In a group that size, losing one person meant losing someone everyone knew completely. Not an acquaintance, not a colleague, someone who had been present at every meal, every fire, every morning and night for years. Someone whose absence would be felt in the sound of the camp, in the dynamics of the group, in the shape of daily life. They told stories. This is perhaps the most important thing. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner documented that among the Juhoansi, one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, death triggered an immediate shift in storytelling. The dead became ancestors in the stories told around the fire. They were talked about, remembered aloud. Their deeds, their personality, their specific way of being in the world kept alive in language. This is the oldest form of what we now call legacy. Not monuments or books or social media profiles, just people around a fire saying, remember when they did that? Remember what they said? Remember how they laughed? The dead lived in stories long after they stopped living in bodies. They performed ritual. Archaeological evidence of death ritual goes back at least 300,000 years, the Rising Star Cave itself. But the specifics of what those rituals looked like are preserved in observable hunter-gatherer cultures today. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, death is followed by a specific sequence. The body is prepared carefully. Certain people take specific roles. Songs are sung. The group comes together in a way that doesn't happen at any other time. The anthropological literature on death ritual across cultures is overwhelming in one finding: every human culture ever studied has a ritual for death. Not some cultures, every single one, not because ritual was invented and spread, but because the human brain requires it. Ritual does something specific when someone dies. It gives the group a container for overwhelming emotion. It tells the nervous system there is a structure for this. There is a way through this. You are not alone in this chaos. The funeral you attend today is doing the same thing a ritual in a savannah camp was doing 50,000 years ago. Different words, different clothes, Same ancient function. They allowed grief time. Among the Ake people of Paraguay, documented by anthropologist Kim Hill, the death of a group member triggered something remarkable. The group went quiet. The usual activity slowed. For a period, sometimes days, sometimes longer, the social energy of the group shifted into something lower, more interior, more careful. This wasn't organized. Nobody announced a mourning period. It simply happened, as if the group itself had a nervous system that registered loss and needed time to recalibrate. This is grief not as individual experience, but as collective experience. The group mourning together. Everyone carrying a piece of the weight so no one person had to carry it all. Let's rebuild the moment. Someone in the camp didn't wake up this morning. They were older, you'd notice them slowing for weeks. But somehow it still lands wrong. The absence at the fire. The specific empty space where they always sat. People move quietly today. There is no plan for hunting. No one suggests gathering. The camp stays still, in a way it almost never does. Someone begins preparing the body. Specific people who have done this before. They know what to do. They work carefully, with something that can only be described as tenderness. Others begin digging. The ground is hard. It takes time. People take turns. Nobody has to be asked. When it's done, the body is placed in the earth. Red ochre is brought out, the deep red mineral that makes something look both like blood and like earth, and carefully applied. Objects are chosen, something the person made, something they loved, something that says they were here, they had a life, they had preferences and skills, and a specific way of being that nobody else had. Then someone begins to speak, not formally, just remembering, something the person did, something that made the group laugh once, years ago. Other voices join. The remembering becomes communal. Nobody goes to sleep easily that night. The fire stays later than usual. The stories keep going. This is how ancient humans handled death. Not by toughening up, not by moving on quickly, by stopping, by staying, by making the absence visible and holding it together until it became bearable. We live in a culture that is deeply uncomfortable with death. We move the dying to hospitals, so death happens away from daily life. We have professionals handle the bodies so we don't have to. We give people 3 days of bereavement leave and expect them back at their desks functional. We say things like they're in a better place and time heals everything, because the alternative, sitting with the full weight of the loss, feels unbearable. Ancient humans didn't have any of that. They couldn't outsource the handling of the body. They couldn't take 3 days and move on. The person was gone from a group of 30. The absence was everywhere, unavoidable, and so they did something we struggle to do. They sat with it. They let it be as big as it actually was. They built rituals that allowed grief its full space rather than compressing it into something manageable and moving on. Modern grief research, particularly the work of George Bonanno at Columbia University, shows consistently that the people who process grief most successfully are not the ones who move on fastest. They are the ones who allow themselves to fully feel the loss while remaining connected to others who share it, which is exactly what ancient humans did. Instinctively, without research, without therapy. They knew something we keep having to relearn. That grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a tribute to be paid. The size of the grief is the size of the love. And love, as it turns out, is at least 300,000 years old. The next time you lose someone, really lose someone, and the grief feels too big, too heavy, too much for a modern life to contain, remember this. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not failing to cope. You are doing something your species has done since before language existed, since before religion, since before civilization. You are refusing to let someone disappear. You are placing flowers in the earth. You are covering them in the color of life. You are staying up late by a fire saying, remember when they did that? Remember how they laughed? You are 300,000 years old in this moment. And every ancestor who ever loved someone and lost them, every single one of them, felt exactly the weight you are feeling right now. You come from people who grieved completely, who stopped everything, who stayed, and you survived because they did.